Welcome to the Impostors. This is a podcast about expertise. Who gets to define it? Who gets recognized as an expert? And whose knowledge is overlooked in humanitarian and development spaces? The Impostors recenters aid around affected communities and lived expertise. In each episode, I speak with refugees, migrants, and Global South practitioners whose expertise is shaped by experience, context, and leadership. These conversations explore what expertise and legitimacy look like in the sector, and how imposter syndrome is often a systemic outcome rather than a personal failure. Each guest joins the Impostors, an archive of lived experience experts in global development. We are a growing network of practitioners committed to elevating lived expertise in humanitarian and development work. I am your host, Laila Raouf. Welcome to the Impostors. So today I'm joined by Samia Mazhary. Samia is a development practitioner with over a decade of experience working in refugee education and education in emergencies. Her work spans program design, monitoring and evaluation, teacher development, and community based approaches to education in contexts of conflict, displacement, and protracted crises. She holds a master's in development studies and is currently pursuing a second master's in education and development with a focus on conflict, emergencies, and peace, reflecting a deep commitment to bridging theory and practice in the pursuit of equity, inclusion, and social justice. So, in today's conversation, we explore imposter syndrome in development and academic spaces, what it means to do long term education work with displaced communities, and how practitioners navigate questions of expertise, belonging, and impact. Samia, I'm so excited to welcome you today. How are you doing?
Hi, Lala. I'm fine. Thank you for inviting me, and it's a pleasure being here.
No, I'm so excited you're here as well. So, for this series, I always start with the same question. Do you ever feel like an imposter in education or development spaces?
Well, I believe, yes, because I had personally experienced it both in my education, less in education, but more in my professional life. In education, I will say less because my education wasn't somewhere that I will say I find myself different because it was a refugee school from kindergarten to year 12. So I was part of all those who I found same like me. All of the children there were refugees. Yeah, I had a title of being somehow superior because I was the daughter of the head of the school. So that's why I might not felt anything like that in my education system initially when it was schooling from primary to high. Later on, I will discuss about it. But in professional life, yes, I did. And despite doing very uh, good work and leading positions, but still, I feel imposter syndrome was something that I was carrying the whole time with me.
And how did the imposter syndrome show up for you? So how did it feel or how did you feel like it manifested?
To be very honest, I didn't know about this term until you asked me to talk about it. And then I reflect on it and I search on it. And then I said, oh, it was something that I was carrying and I never knew about it, right? So I believe whatever position I was getting, it was a feeling inside, feeling that, oh, I wasn't meant to be getting it. It's just the luck that I'm receiving it. It's just because I know English language, I have received it. It's just because I'm confident. Actually, I'm not qualified for this. This wasn't something that people has given it to me. It was something that I was feeling about myself. If I share one of the example that once my brother joined me and my boss, because I was leading one of the city, 50, almost 50 schools at that time. And all of those were 25 were refugee schools, and 25 was a local community school, because at that time it was more of integration project, right? And I have done my first master at that time, and then I like, it was a big thing doing a master from a university. Now that I'm thinking, a university which was in third ranking position in that host community, right? In the host country, not community, in the host country. And then I was leading an international organization in one of the whole city. I was the focal person, but I never thought that I am doing something good, or I have actually achieved something. And then when my boss asked my brother that, oh, how do you feel after like you have a sister like this who is in such a big position and who's leading and this and that. And I was like, what is he talking about? Literally, that was the moment that I reflect, why is he saying this about me? And then I said, maybe he's right. Or maybe he's being kind to me. He's saying this to make my brother feel welcome. But that was the first moment that I thought that why someone is praising and why what I have done. And that was strange that after that was my seventh year and with that organization, and I joined that organization as a volunteer. After volunteering for a few months, then I was a field staff, and then I will become a supervisor for 8 schools. And then they asked me to go one of the earthquake affected area where nobody was willing from the rest of the cities to go. I was a supervisor, and they were offering me a position higher, which was the focal person project manager. So I was like, okay. I asked my family and they said, yes, you can go. And then I said, I can do it. It's an opportunity. Let's avail it, right? I went there. I established that was an earthquake 2005 affected areas in Abbottabad, where unfortunately Osama bin Laden was found later on, right? But I had lived in that place and I worked for that local community. I was a refugee. So now that I'm thinking that I have achieved a lot and I have did a lot, but I never thought something special about me. I never give the credit to me. I was always thinking low about myself.
Yeah. That makes me smile to see, like, you talking about your brother, him asking your brother about, "What is it like to have a sister like this?" And you realizing that, "Oh, you are cool," because Samia, the second I met you, I was like, "Oh, she's it. She's, like, the coolest person, and I want her to be my friend through this master's journey."
Thank
But
you
let's
so much, Laila.
No, thank you. Let's back up a little bit to talk about, your journey into refugee education and education in emergencies. So I know you mentioned you spent like well over 10 years working in education with refugee and displaced communities. So, what originally drew you into this field? Would you say it's your lived experience as being a refugee youth or something else that made you decide you wanted to focus on this as a career?
Laila, my journey to refugee education didn't start as a career choice. It started as a lived reality of my life, right? I was 3 years old when I moved from Afghanistan to Pakistan. And from there, my whole life until I came here and I got the British citizenship. Until that, I was only carrying a refugee status. I studied in refugee school. I was working for refugee schools. I was living in mostly with my family around me who were having the same status, right? And so to me, it was not a choice, it was a lived experience. And when I studied development studies, it was a broader vision of the development sector. But when I came here and I started to pursue my second master's and education, my focus was always about working back for the same schools if they are not as a refugee anymore, but the same people, they have moved back. And though they are in their country, but still they look displaced, they are displaced. Because for those people like me who spend 27 years in a country and then they move back to their own country. So I don't think they will find it their home country. And we shouldn't expect that from them. Automatically, they will feel they're self displaced. So I am always thinking that if when I see my my history, it's all about refugee and refugee schooling. I have nothing except this, right? Then I'm looking forward to do something for the same people in education sector.
Yeah. Wow, thank you for sharing that. It makes me, like, emotional because 'cause we've known each other for so long, but it's been, like, a quasi-professional setting because we met in school, and it's just, like, so nice to have a space for you to, like, really share your experience because, yeah, your entire practice is based and dedicated to your lived experience as a refugee student, coming full circle now to becoming a refugee educator.
Thank you. See, still I feel I have the syndrome, imposter syndrome, that I cannot own these all good words. Thank you, Laila. Thank
No,
you.
you deserve them. And looking back, what moments or experiences most shape the way you understand education and emergencies today?
Well, my own experience, my own lived experience, because I had been through the different projects, I had been to different communities where I have seen people affected by flood, people affected by earthquake, refugees, displaced people, and I can literally visualize that. And when I sit and write something for them, so I can actually see those images, those situations. I can feel it. I had been there. I think that lived experiences.
You know, when we first met, you shared with me that you were teaching classes to, I believe, women in Afghanistan through WhatsApp. Can you talk more about that project in particular and how you decided to do that?
Yeah, when I heard about the closure of school, it was a time when I was with IOM here in London. And then I was okay, I have very busy schedule and I'm working from 9 to it was meant to be 5, but I was always coming home 9 o'clock, right? And then I had my family to give time to, but I said I have to do something because I know the value of education. Whatever I am today is it's because of education and the family background of course I had. But what I can do for the girls in Afghanistan. I can't sit like this, and I don't have connections here to utilize and to do something big. But keeping my own capacity in mind, what I can do. Then I said, okay, at least I can give online classes to those who have access to internet. And then I spoke to one of my colleague from the same organization where we were working in Pakistan. So I contacted her. She was my staff member, and I told her that if you know someone I could be of help to, I'm more than happy. And then she said, "Oh, there's internet issues and that and this. They won't be able. They are scared. What if they are caught? But I'm happy if you start with my daughter, and I will ask my daughter to contact her classmates." So there were not more, there were just 10 girls initially that I started with. And then they all said, we have only WhatsApp. That was something that they all agreed to. So I made a group of WhatsApp, and it wasn't for many subjects. It was just English language. We decided which subject you want. So they all said, we want to learn English language. And I said, okay, if we all agree to that one, let's do that. And then they said we only have WhatsApp. Someone used to use their father. Someone he was using their brother. So eh, the good thing that family was supporting, right? But yes, they were scared. And then we started. And all I could deliver was the voice messages because video was not supported. The internet in Afghanistan is very poor. And then I used to send them the voice messages, list of the words, explaining stuff. So everything was through the voice messages and pictures. And when I was sending them homeworks, they were taking pictures and sending them back. So it was 1 hour in the whole week. It wasn't a lot because if I when I was coming back from office, it was very late in Afghanistan. So the only day we could manage to do it was Saturday. But they were happy and I was a bit of satisfied. I know 2.2 million girls were out of school and those 10 is nowhere close to the number who were waiting for schools to be open. But at least I was happy that I am doing something. I'm not sitting at home. Yeah, that was my experience. And then luckily they found another organization which was providing all subjects. So they have moved to there, but that was another hope for me that they have moved to a better platform.
I love whenever you tell this story, and it definitely is one that I wanted to share on this podcast because, um, I don't know, I can't put into words, like, how much of an influence you were on me.
Thank
And
you.
especially for this, and, like, that's why I wanna talk about imposter syndrome because you talk about this so nonchalantly, but the amount of effort and creativity and innovation and, like, pure connection and, like, lived experience it takes for you to gather a group of girls in a conflict zone with no access to education and then collaboratively design, a curriculum based on their learning needs. It's like textbook what should be happening, and it's just like the power of lived experience meeting these really extreme, complicated needs during emergencies. And, this was something I think I told you, in 2021, I was deployed to, the US evacuation of many Afghans to the United States, and I was, tasked to support their schools while they were waiting to be resettled. And, I can admit that when I arrived and I received my task orders, I was shocked to know that Afghan refugees themselves had already set up their own sustainable schools without the government having to create any frameworks or build curriculum or do anything for them. And it was like this huge reckoning in my career where I realized, like, how much honestly, like, coloniality had impacted my my practice and my views towards education and education development. And so I was, like, determined to study this a little bit more to understand if this is like a pattern and are refugees indeed first responders during emergencies. And then, honestly, the first day I met you, you told me this story about how you responded to the lack of, education for girls by creating your own class on WhatsApp. And I was like, "Okay, this is a really overlooked phenomenon or factor that occurs in the aftermath of education emergencies." And so, like, I went forward trying to, like, highlight these experiences. But yeah, I love that story, and, um, thanks to
Thank you,
you, I
Dara.
was able to go forward with it because honestly, a lot of people doubted. They were like, "Nah, that's a one-off thing, that doesn't usually happen." There wasn't any research, there's no evidence around refugee actions, honestly, or diaspora actions in emergencies.
One thing that I want to share about my experiences with the girls, I remember there was the organization that I was working in Pakistan. They had a module for youth leadership, and I used to train. There are different modules in different countries and different cities. So I will never forget. Okay, all of my groups were 25 girls or boys or 25 teachers with different modules that I was used to teach. One girl, after the fourth of or fifth of day of my training, she came. She said, before, when I was looking at a girl talking in front of 2 to 3 people, I was saying how much courage she has. I wish one day I could do this. So this girl said, today I'm standing in front of this 25 participants and 6 7 staff member, and I'm able to speak. This is a big thing in just 5 days, right? And then when we had refresher after 4 months, we used to had refresher of the same groups for 2 days. And that girl came and said, with the training, what we did, because at that time, during those months, we had flood in that area. And they said, based on this youth leadership program that you trained us, we managed to coordinate with our friends because that was from that same community, that youth group. So they said, we managed to evacuate people from their home. We managed to provide them with the projects that we made because that was the goal of that training, that by the end of the workshop they will make small projects using the local community funds or whatever they can get from, and they will tackle an issue. They said whatever we did in the training, we actually made a strategy to show it in the practical situation. So for me, a girl who could not speak, through the education, can manage to get the courage, the skills. So I always find education as a magical tool, not only for girls, for everyone, to transform them from a passive or someone vulnerable to a powerful and someone who managed to give to others.
Yeah, that's why education cannot wait.
Exactly. Education cannot wait. And that was that WhatsApp thing was something to say that yes, education shouldn't wait and education can't wait.
And honestly, education does not wait. You're proof that the diaspora and the community tends to come together to respond in these really tough emergencies. And sometimes the impact might not seem that big, but it's better than nothing. And I think those efforts should be more recognized, and maybe we should utilize those strengths a bit more.
Exactly.
Why do you think these kinds of diaspora or community led initiatives remain like largely invisible in global education reporting and these like global policies? Do you have any ideas?
Belief diaspora led and community led education often remains invisible because it doesn't fit donors' framework. And unfortunately, most of the projects are donor driven. It's not what the community have made the policies, and they should be spent or run according to the policies they have made. So they need to come to the grassroots level, and our people from the grassroots level needs to go and sit with the policymakers. Only then, I believe they will value the diaspora led or community led educations. Right? That's what I believe.
Yeah, yeah,
And
I
and then
tend to agree.
there's a power imbalance.
What do you mean by that?
I I mean that there's kind of power imbalance, that whose knowledge is valued and whose labor is overlooked, and that thing comes between the gap that between policymakers and implementing bodies. If they come closer, if we remove or reduce that gap, so then things will be in much better position.
Yeah, that's really powerful. You know, the theme of this entire podcast project is imposter syndrome. Do you see connections between this invisibility we're talking about and the imposter syndrome of practitioners or maybe community education leaders at large?
Yeah, generally, because we belong to developing countries where we all believe, unfortunately, that yes, the good things will come from the West. They are the saviors, right? And even from my childhood, I used to see a white person walking on the street, right? A foreigner. For me, this thing that he knows more, he has a lot of wealth, he has a lot of knowledge, automatically that grew up with us, right? our work is not seen, not documented because we are not considered as important as someone from a big organization in the West. They come and they say, not only they think, unfortunately, we as a community start thinking that yes, they know better, they have improved, they have developed, and we have to follow them. That's what dependency theory is saying. And that's what, unfortunately, I have witnessed in the communities and ourselves that we don't give ourselves that importance. Yeah, definitely. I see the imposter syndrome that we all as a community have.
Yeah.
And it come though my nation had never been colonized, but had never been left alone as well. But this colonial thinking has always been there.
Right. And these conversations really make us question whether imposter syndrome, like in this kind of niche area of imposter syndrome, is a systemic outcome of dependency and the legacies of coloniality and imperialism. Well, let's move on to a slightly more uplifting um, note. I want to talk about like your research interest and what you're like currently working on. So you're now pursuing further academic training. What research questions are you most drawn to right now, especially related to like refugee education?
Oh, that's a very nice and interesting question, but I'm still wondering if I share that because it's something very, very, very risky and something that is not easy to digest. But all I can say, yes, it is regarding the gap in education in Afghan girls' schools in Afghanistan. Currently, though, it's shut, but I'm talking about when it was open for girls, even for boys. But currently, I'm focusing just for girls, and it's more to do with the gap. Religiously, we are allowed to question, and especially for those topics that are related to female. There are a lot of hadiths from Bibi Aisha, and the reason Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam married Bibi Aisha was to get lots of knowledge because she was young. She could store lots of ahadith from Prophet and share it to women, right? But culturally, I see women are not as educated in this. I will tell you now, I have to disclose what is the topic. The topic is sex education. Women, due to not having sex education, what problems they are going through. But I have seen lots of conflicts due to not knowing things about sex education, right? Lots of health issues with women, lots of abuses because they think that it was our fault when they were children, right? They don't know about the periods until they get it, right? So there are lots of stories to document, and it all happened because of the lack of knowledge, because nobody talks about that. And I was the victim of it because I was in an educated family, and still I didn't know about these things until I went through this, right?
Mm,
So I had been through a lot in my own life. Despite being from very liberal and educated family, no one spoke about these things.
mm.
So, what will happen to those girls who are not from educated families? What they are going through? I have seen my father. He's a doctor. Patients coming to him discussing about this, that the daughter, because they didn't know how to deal in these days. So lack of this kind of education and considering it a stigma to talk about is something that we need to tackle. We need to discuss.
So it sounds like this research project you're embarking on is this like culmination of like all of your experiences and your lived experience, your cultural background, all coming together into this one project.
Perfect. It's a successful one. Yeah. When I said my, our professors, and they were, "Oh, are you working in this? Are you sure?" I said, "Yes, I am trying. Let's see if I can survive."
I think if anyone can do it, it's you. So
Thank you.
I'm looking forward to seeing what comes of it. I have a question. So, we've been talking a lot about imposter syndrome and the self-doubt and the lack of confidence that comes with that. What would you want early career practitioners, especially those working in refugee education, what would you want them to know about their place, their voice, and their expertise in this field? Any advice?
I want them to know they they know their community, they know their people, they know their situation, geographical, economical, or whatever, much better than others, much better than outsider. If they if they want to bring the change, it's them who can bring the change. And it's them who need to think what is an issue and how to tackle it. They shouldn't rely on someone else. I know we lack the funding, but we don't lack the knowledge. We don't lack the understanding. We don't lack the strategies of overcoming that issues. And we should believe in ourselves. I know it's very difficult because I myself had lots of issues on believing myself, right? But we have to start thinking differently. If I'm a child, if I'm a girl, if I'm a boy, if I'm whatever, I have a lot in me. I have to focus on my strength. I have to count my strengths. And I have to see how my strength can be transferred to my brother, my sister, my colleague. And then I will become a pair. And then I can transfer that and I can see the other qualities in my my friends. So we will become a group, and then we can sit together, and then we can pick an issue that might not be a big issue and not might not bring a big change, but definitely will bring a change and definitely will solve a problem.
Yeah, I one thing I really appreciate about you, Samia, is you're so like optimistic and positive, especially one thing maybe we don't talk about a lot is also the extra burdens those with lived experience carry when they're studying and working in a field that also directly impacts them. And that can be, like, really draining. And I remember, just the timing of, like, studying together in our master's program, the aid cuts, multiple conflicts, polycrisis occurring. It can be really easy to get depressed and feel hopeless about the situation. So, you have always, like, still at the end of every lecture, you're like, "I learned so much. This was so great." Like, you've always been so positive. What keeps you committed to this work even when there are setbacks and when progress feels slow?
Lala, from where I'm coming, belong to a nation who are suffering from 40 years. But if what you said when you went to the Afghan community in America and you said that they had already started their own system, so resilience is something that we Afghan community are proud of. And I had been through the toughest part of life in different occasions, like my childhood. Now that I compare it with my children, we had nothing. And my mom and dad were from one of the elite's family, highly educated, and they have to move everything and come start with nothing. And they had to work every day, and we had to spend time with our grandparents, right? And we hardly had three times of food, but we were considering ourselves lucky among all those who didn't had a roof. We were in a good locality. We never been in the tent. We were in a good society, very posh society. So ups and downs, and then I have seen my parents coming out of that situation, bringing us out of that situation. So these experiences of life that you see, is making you feel that, yes, there's always a bright day after the dark night, and you look towards that. And that's the reason I believe to my positivity and improving my today from yesterday. I don't look at the dark side of my life. I always thank Allah for whatever I'm receiving, and I'm counting. It's difficult for me now to name all the blessings that I have. But if I think, oh, why my childhood was not like this, why I didn't had this thing, why I didn't had that thing right now. We have to think about the positive aspects, the less that we have in our hand, starting from our own body, what we have, and the health that we have, the family we have. If we start thinking positive about ourselves, I'm sure we will remove this syndrome of imposter syndrome, and we will see the qualities in ourselves. We will be hopeful. We will be very useful to the community, to ourselves, and to our family, to all the world.
Well, I think that's the perfect place to end. Samia, thank you so
Thank
much for
you.
speaking with me today. Like, this was so amazing. I'm honestly feel like emotional because I feel I've finally learned another layer about you. And I really hope that people leave this podcast and listen to your episode recognizing how much of an expert you are in this field.
That's so kind of you, Lala, and thank you so much for inviting me. As I said, I never had this kind of experience. So thank you for introducing me to this and killing the fear that I had. And looking forward to hearing this. Yeah.
Samia, again, thank you for sharing your reflections so thoughtfully. This conversation is a reminder that expertise in education isn't only built through credentials or frameworks, but through long term commitment, listening, and accountability to communities. We are so grateful to welcome you to the Imposter Roster. Thank you, Samia.
Thank you, Lala.
And that's it for today's episode. If you'd like to learn more about today's conversation, visit theimpostors.org, where you can explore episode resources and browse the wider archive of lived experience experts. Tune in to The Imposters wherever you listen to your podcasts. I'm Lila Raouf. Thanks so much for listening.